If you're an elementary or middle school teacher and you have experienced school violence, then this video will definitely resonate with you. I teach high school, so this is not something post-pandemic that I personally have experienced, but I'm seeing a lot of teachers, and I have friends from all over the country who are educators at all levels. And I have seen so many people, again, not from necessarily even local to me, but from all over the country, who said things like, I left education because I was kicked. I left education because I was punched. I left education because I was bitten. I left education because I was tripped and fell down a flight of stairs. And administration didn't back me, didn't support me, didn't hold the student accountable. And when the parent came in, they were angry and defensive of their child. And they did not do anything to move to correct their child's behavior. And I get that a lot. I hear people saying that they're getting these toxic parents who come in when their child has committed outrageous behaviors, and the parents are very angry and very defensive of their kids. And so this is something that's affecting the school atmosphere, because if from what I understand, a vocal minority of parents doing this, but it only takes a couple, and it's causing a lot of very good teachers to actually leave the field of education because their thought is, I don't have to deal with this. I'm not going to. So that's the stories that I'm picking up from around the country. Not something I've personally experienced myself. I don't teach those age groups, but it is something that I want to address, the concept of toxic parenting and how it is affecting schools in this country post-pandemic. And with that introduction, I'm going to go right into my story. This happened years ago. My daughter's now in her early 20s, very much an adult, has graduated from college. So this happened many years ago. I once brought my daughter to a playground when she was very little. We were in another neighborhood, so I didn't know anybody. We were feeding a friend's cat, and going back and forth to this friend's house, we kept passing this beautiful playground, upper middle class neighborhood. It was this lovely playground. It had this neat suspension bridge where you could climb up and then walk across the swinging suspension bridge. And we'd never seen anything like that before. So I kept promising her, okay, when we're done feeding the cat, if it's a nice day, one day we'll stop by this playground. So, we fed the cat, we passed by the playground, we saw all these kids playing, and she's like, oh, please, Mommy. So I'm like, all right. And we get out, and she runs over, and true to little kid fashion, she does climb up on the suspension bridge. She does go across a few times. She plays on the different equipment, and then she gravitates, because she's really little, to the wood chips down below on the ground. And she's kind of playing with them, and, how little kids do, just exploring. And I'm watching, and this little boy runs up the ladder of the suspension bridge, and he walks across, and he's got this big, heavy metal Tonka truck in his hand. And I don't really think anything of it until he leans over, he looks down below, and he drops it. And there's all these children down below playing, including my own. And he could have easily hit one of them. It was scary. And it all happened in the blink of an eye. So I quietly kind of got my child away from underneath the bridge to kind of come play with me away from that area, but not too far, because I kept my eye on the little boy. And with a very determined look on his face, he runs down, he grabs the truck, and he proceeds up the ladder again. There's all these kids running around down below, and I don't see a parent who seems to be in charge of him. So I call out, watch out, sweetie. Someone might get hurt if you drop the truck again. And all of a sudden, this incredibly angry woman steps forward and gets right in my face. with a very mad look on her face. And she angrily says, "He's fine," to me in this loud, sharp, embarrassing voice. Again, this woman just radiated hostility. And I've encountered this before. It's almost like the "how dare you talk to my child" voice. And this is very alien to how I was brought up, because when I was born in the 60s. I grew up in the early 70s. And if I was somewhere and I was doing something wrong, it was very common practice for another parent to step in and say something. And this was true. All the moms kind of looked out for everybody's kids. It was sort of a takes a village mentality. So it never ceases to take me aback when I get this level of hostility from another parent. Like, just, whoa, okay, I'm just going to back off because this person seems scary and unreasonable. So I quietly turned to my daughter and I'm like, "Come on, we have to go." And we immediately left. So in light of what's been happening and me hearing about this toxicity in schools, I started to hearken back in my mind after hearing all these stories, and I occasionally wonder what becomes of such bitter and defensive moms once their children grow up and leave them. Now, I want to say, when I posted about this on Facebook, the first thing everybody started doing was speculating about, well, a better question would be what became of her son. And I want to clarify that there's a lot of kids out there that look a different age than they actually are developmentally. So you can have a 3-year-old who looks like he's 5. You can have a 5-year-old who looks like he's 7. And you can have an older child who looks younger too. But it seems like there's a lot of very large kids out there that are actually chronologically very young. And just given that experience, I am very loath to judge this child at all, because we do not know what was in his mind. If he was really young and he just wanted to see things drop, just to see them drop, or if he was actually targeting and intentionally trying to hurt somebody, we do not know. So I am not going to speculate on anything about the child, and I don't think it's appropriate to do so. The reality is, my focus is on this mom and toxic parenting in general. So my theory, tongue in cheek, is that these toxic moms, once their children grow up and leave them, they get on to social media and they find teachers like me who share stories about toxic mothers, and they go after us and they start accusing us of parent shaming, and they start defending their kids. And it's, in other words, I think when they're done misparenting their own children, they take their toxicity and they spread it elsewhere, because there's overwhelmingly, when I told this story, I got tons and tons of support from other parents, because we have literally all encountered these toxic mothers and toxic parents. In 2019, Gillette actually did a commercial about, where they show these fathers at a barbecue, and a bunch of kids are bullying another kid, and they just basically throw him to the ground, and they're like beating him up, and the fathers are all like, "Boys will be boys," and then they show this whole row of barbecues and tons of men going, "Boys will be boys, boys will be boys." So I think that toxic parenting, toxic American parenting, and the whole philosophy of he's fine, like don't interfere with children on a playground, and if my kid is the playground bully, how dare you talk to him, is an endemic issue that most normal parents have encountered. We've all met these really awful toxic parents. So there was a lot of sympathy and a lot of support for my story, but I did get a few people who were very critical of me, and I do want to address that. First off, as far as what happened to the little boy, I'm hoping that he eventually went to school and was taught that it's not cool to injure other people. I'm hoping that he got to school and there were some caring adults who taught him how to be kind and make friends, because he sure was not learning that from mommy. And I want to address separately the people who weren't supportive of me, because I got thousands of responses, thousands of likes, thousands of loves, thousands of shares. I got overwhelmingly supportive comments, and even people telling their own stories about these awful people that they've met. But one person accused me of parent shaming and said the post wasn't relevant to the topic of the Helpful Art Teacher page. So regarding the relevance, my page is about education. I've got a lot of friends who are elementary educators who've recently shared horror stories concerning such parents, and I believe these parents are driving people away from teaching. So I think that this is timely in this post-pandemic age. Now, on to the topic of parent shaming. How can it possibly be parent shaming when all the children concerned are now adults and the event happened over 15 years ago? I mean, literally, my daughter is a college graduate now. She's in her early 20s, and she was a very little kid when this happened. It would be literally impossible for anyone to identify this individual from the details I gave, which is exactly my point. This type of parent seems to crop up everywhere. We've all met them. It's only shaming if the shoe fits. This post will only sting if the reader has ever actually acted like this woman. In which case, sure, they should be ashamed because her behavior was downright inexcusable. But that's exactly my point. Parents like this are literally never ashamed. Ever. They're rude, they're angry, they're defensive. If you ever dare talk about their crappy behavior, they turn it around and accuse you of, quote, shaming. So no apologies here. If you allow your kid to hurt others on the playground, if you get defensive and refuse to stop your child from harmful behavior, why on earth would you expect the rest of the world to say nothing? Seriously? And a few others chimed in with a litany of possible defenses of this woman's behavior. None of them, if true, would have made her behavior in any way excusable. But there is one such possible excuse that I do wish to address. A few folks said that perhaps her child had special needs. Okay, if that's so, then this woman would be wholly unlike any parent of any special needs child I have personally ever met. Now, mind you, I taught K through 4 in the 1990s, 80s and 90s for about 7 years. I taught middle school for 22 years, and now I teach high school. And I have met many, many, many parents of special needs kids. And a special needs parent's worst nightmare is their child accidentally harming another kid on the playground, or their own child being harmed or bullied by others, maybe who don't know how to play appropriately with them. Special needs parents are some of the most attentive, proactive parents I've ever met. They're the first in there redirecting a situation. They're not angry and defensive parents by and large. In fact, parents like this woman who refuse to correct or redirect their children ever are a special needs parent's worst nightmare. He's fine. Because often the special needs little ones don't pick up the social cues that warn more neurotypical children to avoid potentially dangerous situations on the playground. So, the special needs child won't understand, oh, this kid is giving off vibes that he might possibly be violent, that he could be a bully. So it's kind of the special needs parent's worst nightmare if you get the parent of the playground bully, because they're utterly unwilling. These parents are utterly unwilling to teach their children how to be compassionate and play nicely and be kind. So quite the opposite in my personal opinion. Again, I'm not going to speculate on this child. Um, I think it's kind of irrelevant whether he had special needs or not, because if you're taking a metal truck up on a bridge and you're dropping it and it could land on somebody's head, that's a dangerous behavior. And the kid was physically small enough that he could have just been removed. The truck could have been removed. The kid could have been removed. Anything to avert someone getting injured. So no, I don't give her a pass regardless of whatever. But also, I just think that, the assumption when a child misbehaves on a playground or anywhere else that they have special needs and that's why the parent is acting angry and defensive and, refuses to do anything about it. I think quite the opposite, really. I think that it's basically the special needs parent's worst nightmare that there are these other parents out there who really refuse to, teach their children how to play nicely. So I love how, the people who are defensive and angry and rude tend to try and flip the script to make the teacher in the wrong. And that's one of the manipulative ploys that they use to do it. Nice try, but no. So from what I understand, post-quarantine, a lot of elementaries are reporting some very violent antisocial behaviors in the primary grades that they've not previously seen, coupled with some very unsupportive behavior from parents. So my guess is that these parents didn't get a chance to get their kids out, didn't get a chance to socialize their children, and a lot of these really awful behaviors became completely entrenched during the pandemic. And if you're not proactive with your kids and you refuse to correct them and they're not in school physically, there's no one correcting them. So there's not a teacher and there's not peers. So I think that this, I think it'll eventually get resolved, but the problem is that if you have no teachers with early childhood training in there knowing how to help reteach these students and modify their behavior because those teachers are leaving education, it's concerning to me. Every time I hear such a story, which is often now and was rare pre-pandemic, I think of the story from so many years ago. For those who would have liked to see me be more confrontational with this mom, I actually got that as well. Like that I should have stayed and argued with her. I seriously don't think it would have helped or changed anything. We see crappy parenting and sometimes we just can't do much. The reason it has come up in my mind again has zilch to do with me second guessing myself, because somebody was saying, oh, it happened all these years ago and now you're thinking about it. It must be because you should have done more. I read the situation and absolutely handled it 100% correctly. For all I knew, this mom might have had friends there, all on her side, and my main duty under such circumstances is to keep my own kids safe. It actually is more about the national teacher shortage, the awful stories of such parents I'm hearing from elementary school teachers. I keep reading articles and hearing stories about these one or two awful parents refusing to address their children's needs, blaming the teacher, and otherwise harassing educators and making them miserable. Every elementary teacher now seems to know someone who was kicked, punched, assaulted, or bitten, and parents, and sometimes even admin, who refuse to hold this precious child accountable. Such parents have always been out there, but now they have had a period of quarantine to reinforce their children's misbehavior and their own defensiveness about it. So I have a theory that parents like this are actually contributing to the national teacher shortage. Nobody wants to deal with them, so teachers are doing what I did that day, leaving.